Welcome to the Fermented Homestead. If you're new here, my name is Anna, and on this channel, I'm sharing our journey of learning how to turn our home into a homestead. And today we're going to be canning up some navy bean and ham soup. We're going to be going off of a recipe by Creative Homemaking, and it's titled Canning Bean and Ham Soup. I'll share the link for that article down below, and that's where you can get the actual ingredients list printed out for you if you're interested in actually following this recipe. And I took a step ahead last night and I went ahead and soaked the beans. The recipe in there, so we're kind of loosely following this recipe, but we're just kind of using it as a guide. And she doesn't call for actually soaking these, but I like to soak them. I like to soak them in a way that actually helps it to be a little bit more gut friendly, and I soak it with some vinegar. And I set it up last night, and there's 3/4 of a cup of navy beans in each one of these jars. I have a little bit extra here. I'm gonna make some extra here. And then so I put 3/4 of a cup in here, and I put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in here, and just covered it with double with water. Last night they were probably, they were definitely half of this height inside of this jar here. And so I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I'm gonna do now to continue, because obviously we don't wanna keep this water in here. And so I'm gonna bring you in close here. I'm gonna show you over at the sink what we're gonna do to actually kind of rinse these all through, and then we'll continue with the process. Okay, so all I'm gonna do with this, I have this jar with the water still in it, and then I have I think it's a nylon strainer. You don't wanna use metal because you can run the risk of nicking or damaging the rim of the jar, so you want to try your best as you can to avoid using it. I can't think of really anything. You could just dump it out and into a strainer and then rinse it off and then pour it back in here if you don't have something like this. So all we're going to do with this is what I like to do. I just put it directly on top like this and I pour it out. Fill it up. Kind of do it, some swirling, dump it. Just like that. And we're going to do that with all these other jars, and then we'll bring back and show you the next step. So we got all of these all rinsed out, and they're ready to start filling with all the other ingredients. And the recipe, I'm going to go ahead and read it out to you. I'm going to kind of change a little bit. I'm not going to be super strict on the measurements for all of this, but it says 3 tablespoons of chopped ham, 1 tablespoon of chopped onion, 1 tablespoon of chopped carrot, 3 teaspoons, of chopped celery. Why would you do that? It's weird. And then 2 teaspoons of chicken bouillon and 1/4 teaspoon of salt or liquid smoke. I'm just gonna put what I want in there, basically. I know I'm gonna make sure to leave enough room to make sure that if these are gonna expand anymore, that they have the room to, but they have been soaking in water for over 12 hours and there was leftover water in there. So I'm pretty confident that it's not gonna expand too terribly much more. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna chop it as I go, because I wanna make sure that I don't chop up too much. And then we're just gonna fill each jar kind of as we go, if that makes any sense. So I'm gonna show you kind of one of these, and then we'll just keep going. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use this 1/4 cup measuring spoon and fill up most of the ingredients kind of that way. So I got a carrot, however much of the onions, 1/4 cup of onions, and then I'm starting to see now why such small of the other ingredients here, because it kind of gets up to the top and there's not gonna be a terrible amount of room for broth. So this is gonna be one, that's why I grabbed it, because I can't get the rust off of the rim here. So this is one that I'm not actually gonna pressure can. I'm gonna actually cook it. Now let's try on the real one, shall we? We're gonna do either a smaller carrot or a half of the carrot. Because I'm definitely not gonna do a tablespoon of carrots. Like, what is a tablespoon of carrots? Let's do that amount. Let's do a half of a stalk of celery. Just kind of a handful of onions here. We really like onions. Okay, so that's about what we're gonna go with. And I'm gonna go ahead, bring you in close, and we're gonna speed this up, and then I will bring you back when we're ready for the next step. Now we're ready to move on to the next step, and that is just topping it off with our chicken broth. The recipe calls for bouillon and water, but I have chicken broth, so why would I do that? I made this last night. That was part of the preparation for actually making this. If you're interested in how I have made chicken broth, how I generally make chicken broth, I have a recipe on making the chicken broth right here. And then I also believe I have a recipe on how I canned the chicken broth right here. So if you're interested, be sure to check out those videos. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and we're going to siphon all this off. Portion, whatever. We're gonna portion all this stuff off, and then we're gonna can it up. So a couple things that we need to make sure that we have here. We have our debubbler. We have our measuring cup. You can use a ladle. I use a measuring cup, it's just easier. And then also a clean surface to kind of set your stuff down on. You can also use a jar if you wish. And also one thing that you need are paper towels and vinegar. You can use like standard towels if you don't have paper towels. I actually buy paper towels just specifically for this. We don't use them for anything else. I just use them for the canning process. Maybe someday I will, but for now, that's all I do. So we got that, we got this. I think we got everything. We got our lids and rings kind of hiding over here. You can't quite see them. And so I have my canning funnel, and I have a little sieve in it because I haven't actually strained out the chicken broth yet. There's still lots of parts in there. And so I just, to avoid having to do that, I'm doing it this way. Okay, so filling it to 1 inch of headspace here. And then we're gonna take our debubbler. And since it's not packed in there super tight, we can just kind of stir it around and make sure we're getting all of the air bubbles out from in there. And then we're just gonna see if we need to top it off at all. Nope, perfect. Next, what we're gonna do is just run the rim with some vinegar. Just get any grease or any particles that might be on there. Do it really thoroughly. And then we're gonna take our lid, put it on the jar here. The ring, put it on there fingertip tight. One thing I failed to mention, the recipe calls for salt. And I didn't put salt in here. You can put salt, you cannot put salt. It has nothing to do with the preservation process. It's simply for flavor. But I tend to heavily salt, not heavily salt, but I salt my broths very well. So there's likely enough salt in here that we don't need to add any extra. Plus there's also the ham in here. So it's gonna be, it might even be a little bit on the salty side. So if it's not on the salty side, I'll just add it to it when I cook it. So, okay, so we're gonna put the ring on here, fingertip tight, and that's as tight as you can get it with these 3 fingertips. And that seems to work out well for me. And into the canner. So we're gonna go ahead and just bust through the rest of these. I'll bring you in close again so you can see up close and personal how I'm doing this. And then after that, we'll move on to the actual turning on the canner and the canning process. Okay, last jar going in the canner. So we have all 7 of our jars in here, and we're gonna go do the next step here, which is we take our lid. You wanna double check everything's in place. We got a nice good seal, and you wanna look through this vent here, and you wanna make sure that you can see all the way through it. And then you want to make sure that this thing, on my canner, you want to make sure that this thing toggles. And then we're going to go ahead and put it on. There we go. Close it up. There we go. And we're going to crank the heat up to high. And you want to look to make sure underneath your canner that it's centered on the burner, and it is. And so now all we're going to do is we're going to wait. And when this thing is going to start warming up, this is going to take probably about 10-15 minutes. This thing is going to start shooting out steam. And then once this thing's shooting out steam a lot, this thing's going to pop up. Okay? And when this thing pops up, you're going to set your timer for 10 minutes. And that's going to make it so that this vent can actually let out all the oxygen in there and replace it with steam. And that process is going to allow it to actually get up to true pressure that you need. If there's oxygen inside of here instead of steam, it won't get up to the proper pressure. Once that 10 minutes is up, put our weight on, which for us here is 10 pounds of pressure. You want to look up your elevation when it starts to actually jiggle and kind of do its thing. Bring you back and show you an example of that. When that starts to happen, we're going to set our timer for 75 minutes. That is incorrect. We're going to set our timer for 90 minutes. 90 minutes. And then that is the time for the quart-sized jars. So I just did a batch of pint jars, so of a different kind of soup. And then at the end of the 90 minutes, we're going to turn off the burner and leave it alone until all the pressure goes and this thing drops. And then I'll bring you back then. So it has been about 5 minutes or so-ish since this little thing has dropped. And so now we're going to take the weight off. And there's no steam left in it. So now I'm just going to wait a couple minutes and then we'll crack this thing open. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and take these out of the canner. You can see they're still bubbling away. So let's go set this on the counter. So we're just going to leave these here on the counter for the next 24 hours. Same thing with this stuff back here that we left here for 24 hours. Just about to put this stuff away. But this we're going to leave here undisturbed for 24 hours. Let them cool off and let the vacuums form. So these little buttons will pull down. And then I'll bring you back when we're ready to do a taste test and I'll show you what we ended up with here. It has been a little while since we canned up our ham and bean soup, but we are finally ready to go ahead and give this a taste test. I actually have not even tried this yet. I am not a super huge fan of beans, but I think that they're very valuable and they're something that's good to have on the pantry shelf. And I am ready to go ahead and try this because I really want to try it. Okay, so this is the easiest thing on planet Earth to do. You can do it however easy or complicated you want if you want to make like some kind of homemade bread or something like that to serve with it. But I think we're going to do it really simple route. Am I? Yeah, this thing is reflecting. We're just going to warm it up and that's all I'm going to do. So just open it up. Perfect sound. Smell test. It smells really good actually. And we're just going to dump it in our pan here and warm it up. Okay, so we are all ready to taste our ham and bean soup. It is nice and warm. I'm ready to give this a go. I have not tasted this at all. I think I had it a little taste the first day, but I can't remember if I did or not. That is really good. I think probably just a little bit more salt and then it would be perfect. Okay, that did it. A little bit extra salt was all it needed, and it's so good. The soup is so good, I could just eat the whole bowl right now. Okay, so some things to note for next time when I make this. Well, I guess maybe just things to note, not necessarily things to change. But one thing to note is that the beans and the carrots are fairly mushy. They both hold up their shape like on the spoon, and when you look at them, they see, and the carrot and the celery, they all look like they have shape to them. They didn't just disintegrate into nothing. But as soon as you eat them, they definitely are mushy. I mean, they're not a gross mushy, but they just don't have a firm texture to them. The ham holds up great. And another thing to note is that the broth is kind of a thick broth. So whatever compound is in the beans obviously just thickened up the broth. And so it is a little bit thicker. So if you like to have a nice thin soup, I would definitely say to increase the broth to bean ratio, and that would probably help. Another thing you could do is just after you cook it, just add some more broth to it. That would also be delicious. So you can kind of choose your pick on that one, or just cook it as is. It's delicious and it has an amazing flavor, and I'm going to finish eating this for dinner tonight. So I hope that you guys enjoy this video. I hope that you guys give it a try. If you do, let me know down below. I would love to hear from you, and just tell me what you think of it. You don't have to can this recipe. You could also just kind of cut the ratios down and just cook it for your own self, and you could have it for dinner if you wanted to. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, please do give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.